Guess what, everybody? You can buy a home with no money down. However, you can't buy a home with no money.
This is true, yes. So one of the things you're going to have to pay for before we really get to the closing table, Devin, is, as you know, an appraisal, an inspection, and your earnest money deposit.
Mm-hmm.
That'll have to come out of your pocket before you get to the closing table.
So even if you are a veteran buyer,
Mm-hmm.
there are still some expenses that are going to go into this.
Yes.
And some of those can be flexible.
Sure.
Or if you're a USDA buyer and a zero money down loan, there are still some expenses that are going to go into this. So you mentioned an inspection, an appraisal, and earnest money. Let's talk about what those are. Starting with earnest money, because that's the first thing you pay.
Yes. Yeah.
What is earnest money? A lot of people hear that term and go, what is that? What is it for? What does it do?
Earnest money is actually an earnest money deposit. So that actually comes out of the deal with closing.
Mm-hmm.
But an earnest money deposit is it used to be called a good faith deposit, right? So the idea is that you're giving some money to the seller as in good faith for them to take the house or the property off of the
Mm-hmm.
market, right? It's just it's a demonstration that you're serious.
Mm-hmm. And in this market, that amount can be different based on the purchase price of your home. I've actually done deals where the earnest money was $100. Now, those were lower priced houses.
Right.
I've done deals where the earnest money was $5,000.
Yeah.
In this market, generally, it's going to be somewhere around $500, $1,000 for most deals. Again, that's flexible. Now, the thing I want to point out from the contract side, from the real estate side, is that earnest money is refundable in some cases if the deal falls through,
Yes.
if the inspections are bad, if the house doesn't appraise and you can't work out the deal with the seller, then generally speaking, you're going to get that earnest money back, so you're not losing it. However, that's not always the case, and you can lose your earnest money if you don't perform what's in the contract.
Yeah, well, and that's why you need a real estate professional like yourself to be writing the contract, because those are the kind of things that can jump out and get you, and all of a sudden you're out your earnest money.
Absolutely.
If the contract was not written by someone as
Because I
seasoned
mean, even
as
if
you
it's
are.
$500, that's still $500. That's a car
Absolutely.
payment. That's
Yeah.
your utilities. That's half of your rent or mortgage in many cases.
Yeah.
That's groceries for a family my size. So it's not nothing, and so that's not something that most people are just going to be, $1,000. Who
Exactly.
cares? No, you're going to care when it's money out of your pocket.
Right.
So that's earnest money, and again, you said it comes off the purchase price at the end.
Yes, it gets worked in, it gets baked in at closing.
So that earnest money is something that once the contract is accepted, then in Kentucky generally we have 3 days to get it. So if today's Monday, then by Wednesday we need to get that earnest money, and it's going to go to one of a couple of different places depending on what the contract says. Sometimes the company that you're working with as a buyer will hold it. So like for me, generally we hold our earnest money here with our buyers. Sometimes the listing side company holds the earnest money,
Right.
because for them it's a little bit more protection. For the seller, again, if you don't do what you say you do in the contract,
Yeah.
then they can keep it, and it's easier because they have it. Sometimes neither company wants to hold the earnest money or is set up to hold the earnest money because there are special accounts that have to be available. And so the title company that is working on the title, making sure there's no liens, all that sort of stuff, sometimes they may hold it. You don't have to worry about that part. That's my job, but we have to make sure that we get that earnest money in.
Absolutely.
And it is part of the contract, and it can be refundable, it can be lost, but if you close, it comes off your purchase price. All right, so that's earnest money, but there are other costs that you mentioned. One is the inspection.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And a lot of people know what an inspection is, but from a lender standpoint, why do you think people should make sure that they have an inspection?
So from a lender standpoint, we are way more concerned with the appraisal.
Right.
Because that's how we know that the collateral is worth what it's worth, right?
Mhm.
From from a real estate standpoint, I will say an inspection is always a good idea, so that you don't stumble upon things a year in
Right.
that you could have found found sooner before you close on the house.
Right. And a lot of people don't understand that there is a difference between the inspection and appraisal and what they're even looking at.
Yeah.
So an inspector is going through, they're testing all the outlets, they're testing all the faucets, they're opening and closing the doors on the cabinets, they're looking at the ductwork, all that stuff. What are some of the main things that an appraiser is looking for that might be a little bit different?
Appraisals run off of comparables. So and this is really just how they're putting a dollar amount to the property, right? You'll have a square foot. The square footage of the property is huge because you have to compare that to other properties in the area.
Right.
How many bedrooms? How many floors? What neighborhood is it in? All these things go into play when you're talking about putting a dollar amount on what the property is, and that's really what you're doing with an appraisal.
Mm-hmm. So they're concerned about making sure if you are lending, let's say, $200,000,
Right.
making sure that that house is worth $200,000. And the thing is that could be different in different counties, right? If it's in this county versus this county, maybe over here it's only 180, but over here it's 200. Different school districts.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, we have some nice school districts. We have some that are not as highly rated. So that can affect value because it affects desirability. How big it is.
How big it is huge. You do a price per square foot, and that does change based off of what we were just talking about, county, school districts. But I mean, they apply that price per square foot.
Right, and why that's so important is, let's take bi-levels, right?
Sure.
There are so many bi-levels in northern Kentucky.
Yeah.
And everybody always tells me, I don't want to buy a bi-level, and they always end up buying a bi-level. That's just how it works. But I have shown bi-levels that are 800 square feet. 3-bed, 2-bath bi-levels that are 800 square feet. And they're priced comparatively for the market in terms of what other bi-levels are priced at, right?
Right.
But I've also shown bi-levels. I sold one bi-level that was 1,500 square feet. And so when we bought that bi-level, guess what? It was priced the same as several other bi-levels that we'd seen 8, 9, 1,000 square feet. Guess what the better value was? Right? So she bought this house. And then 2 years later, she decided, you know what, I don't actually like this area. I don't want to be here. And so she said, let's sell it. She was concerned, I've only owned it for 2 years. I'm not going to be able to get my money out of it. But we got a steal because of how big it was.
Okay.
So when we went to list this bi-level, we listed it at a price. She's like, you're never going to be able to sell it for that. I said, honey, trust me. Because I knew what we had. And the appraiser called me when we were under contract. He said, here's my problem. I think this house is worth every penny that you're selling it for, but I'm having to make all these adjustments because your bi-level is so much bigger than every other bi-level in the area.
So that happened in the appraisal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So appraisers are very concerned. They're not concerned about the paint color. They're not concerned about, do all the cabinets, work properly? Are they all lined up and everything like that? They're not even concerned about, some of the things like, oh, the carpet's older or fraying. They're concerned with the size, the location, the livability.
Yeah, the livability is important.
Right? That's for you.
That's for me, yes.
So the appraisal is important, but that's for the lender. The inspection is for us. You and me working on buying this house, we want to make sure that you don't walk into the house and all of a sudden you've got to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on something because nobody bothered to check and make sure all the outlets worked. Now, here's the flip side. Can you do an inspection and an appraisal and still end up having a house with lots of problems?
You can, but your chances are less.
It absolutely happens. And unfortunately, I've had that happen with clients that I've worked with where they did all the inspections. They did mold, they did radon, they did thermal imaging to make sure that the walls were all insulated. They did all this stuff. And the first storm comes through and the rubber roof wasn't attached properly and blows right off the house and the whole kitchen falls in.
Sounds like a home warranty might be a good idea as well.
Right. So there are lots of things that we're looking at there to try and mitigate your risk, but there is a difference. And so, yes, I do have to say this because it is possible. You can waive your right to an inspection. I do not recommend it. I do not suggest it. If you tell me that that's what you want to do, I'm going to tell you that you should not. You're going to have to sign a couple of pieces of paper that say that. But can you waive an appraisal in most cases?
No, you cannot waive an appraisal in most cases. The only time that you could waive an appraisal is if you have such a large down payment that the lender is not concerned about securing their collateral.
Right.
Most cases, 99% of the time, that's not the case. So, and especially if we're going to be talking about trying to get into a home with no or as low money down as possible, that's not going to be the way it works.
Yeah. So hear what we're saying, folks. If you're looking at an FHA loan, 3.5% down, a VA loan, a USDA loan, or even a conventional 3%, 5% money down loan,
even a 20% conventional,
you're not going to waive your appraisal. It's a bad idea.
Right.
In most cases. Now, if you're buying a $200,000 house and you're putting down $150,000, maybe you waive your appraisal.
Yeah.
Because you probably don't care. You're probably going to do something completely different with that house. But we want to make sure that you are protected, and that's what the inspection does. That's what the appraisal does.
One other thing about the appraisal. Let's say that, you know, the asking price was $200,000 and you put in an offer for $200,000 and it was accepted, and then the appraisal comes back at $190,000. That you'll go back to negotiations, which more than likely will end up being the house isn't worth what we thought it was worth. Both parties, the buyer and the seller. We need to lower the asking price, so it might end up saving you money in the long run anyway.
It could. And again, that's a whole different video that we need to do to explain that, because there are a lot of situations. But it can end up working that way. And that has happened where an appraisal comes in lower and we have to work on that. It's also happened where appraisal comes in higher.
Right.
And you're moving in with equity already.
Yeah.
And that's a fun day too.
That is a fun day. Who doesn't like that?
But the point of all of this, not only are appraisals and inspections important, but there are some costs out of pocket that you are going to have during the contract, because you pay for the appraisal while you're under contract.
While you're under contract. Same with the inspection, same with earnest money.
Right, because the inspector wants to get paid when they do the job, not 30 or 45 days later.
Right.
Same with the appraiser. So when you're going into buying a home, I'm going to go in 3.5% down, I'm going to get down payment assistance. I'm going to go in, I'm going to use my VA loan, I'm going to use my USDA loan, I'm going to do no money down. No money down or low money down does not mean that there are not costs.
Right. There's closing costs as well.
Right, which we've talked about in another video, and I'm sure we'll talk about more. There's also, you still have to move too.
Yes.
Don't forget that. I mean, unless you happen to own U-Haul, you're probably going to have to get some friends or hire some help, get you a truck or two, depending on how much stuff you got, storage container or facility. So there are those kinds of costs, boxes, all that sort of stuff can go into it as well. So just think when you are going into this and you're talking to Joe, you're talking to me, say, I'm excited about buying a house. We're excited for you to buy a house, right?
I am. I'm very excited.
Doesn't he look excited?
I am. I'm so excited, guys. We're giving people homes here.
But we want to be realistic too, that there is some time, there is some money that does go into this. But here's the thing. We know what we're doing. We know how to make this happen for you. So if you have questions, how do they reach you?
513-907-2530.
Or 859-962-7978.
Thanks for coming by, guys. Give us a call. We've got some great options for you. Much better that time. I can know how to talk at the very end, right?
Just put your thing